I'm Roshi Joan, and I'm the abbot here. And this was a kind of flash that we had, that it's really important for a place that values so deeply socially engaged Buddhism and socially engaged Dharma, that we not turn away from the significance of this election experience, both in terms of the outcome, but also the process that all of us have been going through in the run-up to the election. And so we had a number of speakers prior to election, and I'd like to thank them for their contributions: Reggie Hubbard and Lama Rod Owens, Sharon Salzberg, Rhonda McGee, and I'm actually doing a post-election event because who knows how this all is going to turn out. And I was reminded as I was preparing internally for today of some words from Thich Nhat Hanh. He once wrote, "Our own lives are the instrument with which we experiment with truth." Our own lives are the instrument with which we experiment with truth. And recently I asked a friend who said he was really focusing on truth. What do you mean by truth? So maybe we'll discover something about that in the course of this evening together. Noah Kigaku will be turning the chat on and off. It's distracting when we're teaching or when we're meditating to have the chat stream on, but you'll be informed about when the chat stream is turned on. And also there are times when we want to hear from you directly, and that will be really great. And Noah will ask you to raise your hands virtually, and you'll be called upon. And we're going to be doing a number of things. You know, one of them is that we are going to be tracking the election results. And parallel with that, we want to track what our experience is as this state or that state turns red or blue. And to really notice our response. I certainly have been noticing my response in the run-up to this. It's not that we're sitting here, you know, in the kind of pseudo equanimity, damped down, bypassing. It's more that we really want an outcome which will diminish the kind of suffering that we're seeing in the landscape of our society today. So how we work with that, how we understand it, how we learn from it is really important. So we will have pulses of practice where we stop, take a breath, notice, notice our physical experience, noticing what feelings are present, what thoughts are present, and so forth. We also want to explore some questions that we think are really important, and we will do that through chat and also through raised hands and speaking. We also have some great songs, and I asked my partners in crime here for a good song list. I think I came up with the best list, didn't I?
You may have.
I mean, you know, nothing like being—
Some good ones from the 60s and 70s.
Thanks a lot, Kozan. That stung. But anyway, we just thought, you know, a break to hear Tracy Chapman or The Doors or the Stones. Anyway, that it would be really good. And then, you know, we want to learn how this process in our country, how democracy can express itself, and also express itself in a way that does not necessarily engender serious and toxic self-righteousness on our part. No matter who wins this election. And again, no matter who wins, I keep saying, that's when the work begins. It's been work up to now for many of you and for us as well. We've been blogging, we've been on social media platforms, we've been writing letters, we've been calling. I've been producing little videos here and there, but really what is going to count is, no matter what the outcome is, to not feel as if a loss or a victory absolves us from our future and our relationship to our future. So that's my introduction. Kozan?
Thanks, Roshi. So it's kind of funny that the three of us have laptops in front of us, and we're all watching the news a little bit, but we're all also have laptops in front of us so we can see everyone, that there are hundreds of us together in this way in community during this kind of pivotal evening. Who knows what will happen this evening, who knows what we'll know or not, but an evening where we bear witness to the machinations of our democracy and where we do it together. And so we'll be delving into the news and the updates a little bit, but we also just want to see everyone who's on, to see everyone's face. So if you are with us and you don't have your video on, and you're able to put yourself in a situation where you can, that'd be wonderful. And if you do have your video on and we're all seeing each other, just know that it feeds us, presences us. And there's so many faces I recognize, so many people who sit with us daily or weekly or come to many of our programs, and so many faces I don't know. So welcome if this is your first time joining Upaya, joining us for practice. And for what is bearing witness this evening, really bearing witness to what's unfolds and showing up fully to it. I'm a priest here at Upaya and have been here for 6 or 7 years now, but before I moved to New Mexico, before I moved to Upaya, I was a political organizer and activist for about a decade. So this is also a little bit of delving into a life that I've mostly stepped back from, but is very much in my bones. So that's a little bit about me, Noah.
About me?
Yeah.
Well, this was our, let's see, we were together last election in somebody's house, and the polls hadn't really closed by the end of the evening, but there was a kind of a feeling in the air. So I'm hoping to, practice with whatever feelings arise. Let's see, I first came to Upaya 10 years ago, and I voted with Roshi a few times since then, but we've never done anything like this. And thanks to COVID and the pandemic, we've been stretching our technical abilities and been meeting so many people on Zoom, and just feeling like our Sangha is growing and growing. And so thanks to all of you who are joining us now and all of you who will see this later. Looks like we have 550 people on, which is, I mean, can you imagine 550 people on the Upaya campus? It would just be—
in the living room.
Yeah, in the living room. It would just be swarmed. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah. So Noah, would you open the chat stream?
Yes.
And we would so appreciate, where are you from? We'd love to have a kind of, okay, I'm opening up my, great, Julie, thank you. Harlem, New York City, St. Louis, Missouri, Oakland, Phoenix, Chicago, Farmington, Moscow. Well, I know, it could be Moscow here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Mexico
so
City.
So fast.
Well, wow. Santa Barbara, Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Salt Spring Island, Deep Bows, Minneapolis.
You can slow it down.
Can I?
Yeah, you just kind of go like this. And
Oh,
then,
thank
then
you.
you can scroll through.
Okay. Oh, that was causing. Okay, Kensington, California, Vancouver, Canada, Hot Springs, Santa Rosa, Cleveland, Ohio. Wow.
Oh, hi, California.
Where else? Noah, call some out.
Paris, France, welcome.
I bet that's Amy.
No, it's Nahema.
Okay. Australia. Hi, Sue.
Miami. Oh, Miami.
Oh, Miami. Maine, Asheville, Menlo Park, Montreal, Austin, Rhode Island,
Asheville,
Asheville.
Durham.
and Anchorage, Alaska. I'm from there. Hi, Meg.
A lot of Canada. So many of you joining us from up north,
Possible
Australia,
future? No.
New Jersey, Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, Bethesda, Maryland, couple locals, couple Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Montreal. Wow.
Wow, this is great.
Oh, I like that. Australian living in Catalonia.
Uh-huh.
Welcome.
So I'd like to invite us to take a pause. Let's just take a breath. Maybe turn the chat stream off just for a moment. And notice what you're experiencing in the body. And what feelings are present for you. What thoughts? See if you can bring your attention to the breath. Okay, that's it for that pulse. So I'm sure that you're tracking like we are in various ways. And just to let you know that in the New York Times site, Biden has 131 electoral votes and Trump has 92. But I always say the itinerary is subject to reality. So we will see what happens. But it's interesting to look at our expectations. And I'm going to ask Noah to open the chat stream and just kind of for fun. No one's going to hold you to any expectation. But in terms of what expectations do you have, not of this Zoom we're doing, but in terms of your experience of this climax of the election process. So what are your expectations? And we'll share a few of those.
I expect the work to begin.
Expect Biden healing. What we resist persists, stay grounded. Now rest, to wake up tomorrow, healing. I wish to stay grounded and resilient. Acceptance, accountability, fear of guns.
Jonathan Shaler says, worried that no matter who wins, we are so divided.
Wanting to return to normal.
Nothing and everything to change.
Rebuilding community, restoring humanness, relief, building bridges, a death and rebirth,
Just keep not knowing.
helpless and hopeful, fear of chaos.
Stop obsessing over the news. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Much work to do, no matter who wins. Holding all who are elected to account. Truth. Patience. I expect a peaceful transition. Show up and plunge in.
Vivian says, there is much to be done and undone.
Real change.
A lot of people weighing in that we may not know tonight. There's a long way to come.
Keeping both sides in my thoughts. Not to return to normal. Civil war, concern no matter who wins.
Peace with uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Maturing as a country is my hope. And moving beyond othering.
Mm-hmm. Not sure really what I expect, waiting in the moment and hopeful we will figure it out.
Reboot hope. A peaceful transition and to have our voices heard. This is not all there is. Huh.
Wise hope. Thank you, Abby. Hopeful for healing.
Kat, thank you for the Bernie Glassman quote. Fear is a form of knowing.
That's beautiful. Somebody said, I love seeing the three of you together. Thank you. So do we.
Yeah, it's nice. Not returning to normal.
Yeah, what is normal now? So I'm going to invite us to just take a pause. This is really rich, what you've written. Thank you. And again, coming back to the breath, taking a moment to get grounded. You know, when you're looking at expectations, you're looking forward. It's drop into now for just this moment. So, coming back to another question for you. What do you think you will do if your expectations don't come to fruition? So let's open the chat stream.
Mourn. Try harder. Practice, practice, practice.
Cry. Cry.
Go deeper.
Heed the call. Keep working. The same thing I did this morning. Meditate more. What's that?
Start again. I like the same thing I did this morning.
Keep on trucking. Barbara Berggraf.
Thank you, Barbara. Never give up.
Chop wood, carry water.
Cry like I did 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I love this. Love my kitties.
Find connection, keep working, persist, adapt, withdraw, take action. So they're all different people chiming in.
And notice the body as these responses are passing through our awareness. So thank you. I think it's really important for us to understand that our expectations and how we work with our expectations relates very much to our aspirations to end suffering and not contribute to suffering and to move toward healing. So I'm going to ask Kozan for a minute, if you would just explore the electoral map in the various ways that you do before we move on.
And the snake.
And the snake, yeah.
Well, you know, we won't delve too far into all the numbers. If you have watched any cable TV today or tonight, that'll be kind of 4 to 8 hours of going through the numbers endlessly. right now, essentially, we don't know. And that may be the case for some time. We're watching Florida come in, and it's looking like Trump will be taking Florida. Some friends on the ground there have texted that in the state, most people have called it for Donald Trump. And, some important swing states that are reporting in now, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, are all looking pretty close. So if maybe we had some hope that early in the evening, we would kind of know the results, it's not looking quite like that. And so things will change with time. We have only, 19% of votes reporting from Pennsylvania, 64% from Ohio, 20% from Michigan. Earlier in the night, I showed Noah and Roshi the snake from 538.com, which I believe Saturday Night Live made famous the other night. This is Nate Silver's kind of projections in the polls. And it's just useful for us to track kind of what it would look like to get to over 270 electoral votes. And so we see those swing states, Florida, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, all on the line here, all determining if this is going to be something we know by the end of the night or something that'll be a week-long election night rather than just this Tuesday night. And, I see Reggie on with us, Reggie Hubbard, who joined us, kind of launched us in this election series, and with a great deal of energy and inspiration and insight. And it was a lot of fun. We were all up at the refuge that day, or we were up at the refuge that day. So you were joining us in the midst of the Aspens. We're back down in Santa Fe now, Reggie, but you're really in the thick of things. And
in DC,
at Move On, you're really on the ground and in the mix. And I was wondering if you could share what you're seeing and how you're sitting with the election as it unfolds tonight.
Well, thank you, Kozan, Roshi, Noah, and blessings to you. Great to see you and be in community. How am I? I mean, I've been doing.
Wait.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's my beard.
Yeah, they had their mics off.
Oh, right on. I've been tilling this soil, some would say for 20 years, but in this most recent incarnation for 5 years. So I was in the Bernie Sanders campaign, and whether we are successful or not in terms of the electoral outcome, the one thing I'm most excited about is that millions of more people got engaged and involved, and that is what's necessary not only for a functioning democracy, but for a functioning society. It's like for those of us that are in deep practice, and for those of us that have any practice, but especially those that are deeper practitioners or teachers, we need people to care in order for them to heal, right? So regardless of what happens electorally, I wish I had been on sooner because I would have told you, don't ever trust Florida for anything but surprises and disappointment. I've worked several campaigns in Florida. No shade on those who live there, but like Florida took years off my life, which I'm trying to regain through my active practice, and that's not a joke. But the other thing I'll say is that if you called someone and made them feel more part of the process, then you have done good work. If you have texted someone and made them feel more important part of the process, you've done good work. Like the work of connection is actually the work of politics. So while I am hopeful with respect to the electoral outcome that it will be as many of us hope for, what I'm most excited about is that millions of more people are engaged and think that the system can be for them. And if they think the system can be for them, then guess what? It will be for them if we keep our shoulder to the plow and till the soil.
Thank you, Reggie.
I hope you can stay with us for a little while. I know.
I can. Did you want me to read that poem now or later?
I think it would be great to read it now because it sure improved my day.
Okay.
Caused, there have been some tears shed in this process, and this poem made me, lifted my spirits.
Well, give me a second to find it, but
And Reggie, you gave
yes.
such a fantastic talk. You were the kickoff of our election series, and people just were so inspired. Just, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the spirit and also the wisdom that you brought.
I'm honored to hear that and honored to share that. And and thank you for the opportunity to share this poem. Like, I read as part of a meditation last week, so for those of you who need super inspiration, read Langston Hughes's Let America Be America Again. And that will get you in touch with like the wisdom traditions of the United States and the Black poetic tradition. So Let America Be America Again is a beautiful poem. This is not as beautiful. It's a little bit more furtive. And just a little bit of background, I've worked in politics this iteration for 5 years. So I've worked in the center of the Bernie Sanders experience in 2016, have been in the heart of the resistance since 2017 at Move On. And so the way I'm encountering this election is somewhat tired, right? So with that refrain, here is what I wrote in terms of the poem. So it's a bit dated because it was yesterday, but here we go. 'Twas the night before election day, and all through the land, you could sense something in the air, the uncertainty we couldn't stand. A day so ardently wished for, a chance to make things right, and a high probability of a long morrow's night, which means right now. Millions have spoken, but what did they say? Did they say another term of this or choose another way? A virus run amok with nary a plan. How in God's name could someone vote for that man? But some will, and that fact will remain and be true. And what are the rest of us supposed to do? First, we connect with one another. Hold on, lost my place. First, we connect with everything that we can and tell them of the hopes we have for this land. Let us dream with a love that devours their hate. And can we please never mention that first presidential debate? Just 24 hours and polls will soon close. So let's take a deep inhale, breathe deep through the nose, and exhale to clear space for what will unfold. A story so beautiful, ready to be told, of people uniting against hate and fear and love for our planet and all humanity. Abundantly clear that yes, we took a stumble, for sure got off track, but we the people are determined to make our way back. Stronger and woker, more humble and wise, our shadows behind us, the sun in our eyes.
Oh, Reggie, thank you.
I am so just inspired and blown away that you're even upright right now, knowing that you have been in the trenches this whole time.
Right.
Election night, the few times I've done an election season all the way through, I was
brutal.
seen double by election night. So it's really something. And I want to just shout out to your, you have a yoga practice and are a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
And you're going to be teaching this week. And I wonder if I can share with people that if you feel like you need some centering, some meditation, some flow, go to Active Peace Yoga, go to Reggie's site, sign up. He's offering, despite how exhausted you must be, a number of times to kind of center together, including 10 a.m. tomorrow, some meditation and breath work. So go check it out, join in.
And thank you all for the blessing to share and the blessing to be in community. And one thing I'll say, Kozan, is that that's what the beauty of deep practice is, right? So like I meditate, like asana keeps my body right, and meditation keeps my mind clear. So like, I mean, I will not be watching results. As soon as I log off with y'all, I'm going to like hang out with my brother and then go to sleep and pray before I go to sleep, and I'll encounter what I encounter in the morning. But deep meditation and taking care of the body is what allows you to withstand the storms of life, right? So like my active practice has prepared me for the storm that I've been given. I consider it a gift. When it was given to me at first, I was like, what is this? But now I see it for the gift that it is. And it's been a gift to be with you all. Love and grace to all. Hope that my poem and my presence has been to your healing and lessened your suffering.
And thank you, Reggie, for Move On and being in the trenches. I'm just thrilled that you're connected with UPI in the way that you are. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask Kozan to go back to what the map looks like right now. Where are we, Kozan?
You know,
we are in uncertainty. There's a part of me, I love your inspiration, Reggie, of you know what's happening in Florida, we know kind of the basics of what's going on, but this instinct to kind of follow every vote that comes in is one that's so deep-seated in us. We've been watching this drama unfold for a year and a half now. We've been watching this election. There was a cartoon, maybe a New Yorker cartoon. I've been waiting 3 years, 11 months, and 28 days to vote. And it seems like we've been waiting all that time for these results. So we want to tend very closely to them. And we're, here to spend time together and to know if anything major changes, and I'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure some of you will be too, in case we get any big news. But for the time being, we don't know.
So I'm reminded of my wonderful teacher, the late Roshi Bernie Glassman. And Bernie and his late wife, Jishu, both of them taught the profound importance of living the 3 tenets. And those tenets are, the first one is not knowing. What is it to rest in beginner's mind? What is it to tolerate the inconceivable? What is it to be surprised? What is it to rest with radical uncertainty? And what is it to come to terms with the truth of uncertainty, that even though we have a sense of predictability of what might happen in our future, like who in my lifetime, the Berlin Wall came down, same-sex marriage, Barack Obama was president. So many things have happened that I could never imagine that they would have happened. Or the last election really surprised me. So we live in this constant stream of fundamental uncertainty. And how do we ride the waves of birth and death? And I hope rebirth, but that's just my hope. Then the second tenet that Bernie and Jishu felt was so important is bearing witness. And that is not about being a bystander, not bypassing, not being morally disengaged, not being morally apathetic, but actually when Bernie and Jishu used the term bearing witness, that term related to a deep connection, non-separation with things as they are, both the truth of suffering and the ending of suffering. So bearing witness. And I remember sitting in Auschwitz with Bernie and 150 other people in the 1990s and really listening to Bernie say again and again, we are here because we never want to see what happened here happen ever again, anywhere. So we bear witness. We bear witness to joy too. Thank you, Reggie. And then compassionate action, arising from not knowing, from this kind of openness and bearing witness, not separating from things as they are. What is aligned, what is congruent, what will really serve to bring others to the other shore before oneself? What will be the response that is healing? And that was something that many of you said in the chat stream. Compassionate action, healing. And I remember when Bernie and Jishu shared the 3 tenets with me years ago, sitting with dying people, and I was working in the prison system at that time, how important these 3 lenses or valences were in terms of the kind of charnel ground practice that I was engaged in at that time. And in a way, we're in another charnel ground. This is where we are invited to practice at this time. And although Kozan, we did have a discussion about numbers. I don't want people to be completely out in the cold. Maybe you could catch us up on the electoral map, please.
Of course, of course. So I can't say no to that. Just a few tidbits on the electoral map. So as we mentioned, Florida looks like it's going to Donald Trump. We're looking at North Carolina, which is about 84% reporting, and it looks very close, 49.7% Biden, 49.1% Trump. And this is another kind of key state. If North Carolina did turn for Biden, be a pretty good indicator of the outcome of the election as a whole. Many of these early swing states are going to be, very nice to wins for Biden and kind of must wins for Trump. It's been tightening in North Carolina with these early votes come in generally from the cities, the later votes come in from the rural counties. So at 50% reporting, I think Biden was up by 8 points. And now as we're getting closer to 90% reporting, it's tightening, almost tied. So that's the way a lot of these states are expected to go, Pennsylvania, Ohio. We won't know a lot of the Midwest because the mail-in votes won't be counted immediately. We won't get that vote in until late tonight, tomorrow, the next day even. So a lot of the election, if we don't know those states tonight, will end up being a kind of 3-day affair, or 4-day affair.
But some you said to me earlier are already counted.
Yeah, so Florida was already counted. Pennsylvania is looking like, I have it here, will only be start counting on election day. So a state like Pennsylvania, we won't know quickly. There's, these different laws for each state. Some can process them the second they get a mail-in vote, others a few days before election days. Some states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, they actually can't start counting them until the polls close. So we have very different timelines for all of these states, as you've probably heard. But, I'm looking right now at the close race in North Carolina and the close race in Ohio, though it's looking like Trump is pulling ahead in Ohio by about 3 points at this time. So those are the 3 swing states with the most reporting at this point. Ohio has 70% reporting of votes. And the New York Times is doing an interesting thing where they're looking at those 3 swing states and basically saying if Biden wins one of them, we'll pretty much know the outcome of the election. And all 3 look like they're leaning toward Trump, though North Carolina's too close to call. So, we're in, I think, as I said at the beginning, I had a little bit of hope that this would be clear election night election. And it's looking less and less likely, I would say, is what the numbers are showing us.
Thank you, Kozan, for the news engendering ambivalence. So let's take a pause. And breath deep in the body. And on your next inhale, see if you can release any kind of stickiness to results and just be with the experience of the inhale as you experience the inhale in the body. And exhale, relax. And again, on the inhale, bring your attention fully to the sensation of the inhale in the body. And on the exhale, relax.
We're going to kick back with a bit of a nap.
Okay, thank you. So we'd like to open up now to any questions that you might have of Kozan as the political tracker.
Of any of us, but yeah, if there are any
But
political questions.
particularly Kozan. And you can put those questions in this chat stream, or you can raise your hand and Noah will call on you.
So we've had one person, Judy Monahan. You've had your hand raised for quite some time. Do you have a question for us?
I am just here with my friend Ruth Bader Ginsburg, hoping for the absolute best. And I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to be calm.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Yvette asks, when the news orgs call the winner of states, are those projections based on clerk's office data, partial data? I worry about the count after November 3rd for some states. How do they determine to call the winner?
Yeah, it depends on the news organization, as we learned in 2000. But a lot of these states, when they're called this early, so, you know, Florida, we're seeing more results at this point, but basically no swing states will be reported until there are a lot more of the votes counted. And so these early states that are called are all non-swing states. They're states that are basically going off polling where it's clear once the polls close who the state will go to. So a lot of the news organizations, for example, called New Mexico for Biden the minute after the polls closed here. They hadn't started counting most of the votes yet. So that's a bit of what you'll see when you're watching most of the media out there.
Ellen Archer.
Yeah. Have all of the early votes been counted already? They're all in?
You mean the mail-in votes?
No, I mean the people who went to the polls and voted early.
Oh yeah, yeah. So either way, it depends on the state, and so each state is going to deal with those differently. So, for example, Florida and Arizona both count them all early. So we had a lot of good numbers from Florida, which is why we're getting results from Florida so quickly. Arizona, a little bit later in the night, we should have very good numbers. States like Pennsylvania, they won't start counting a lot of those early votes. The people who vote first get counted last, kind of thing, in many of these states. So that's going to be true in the Midwest, it'll be true in Pennsylvania. But in Arizona, I think North Carolina too, can begin counting before the polls close. Yeah, so there's some states where we'll get those votes and some states where we won't. You have to look at it state by state.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank you. I didn't know how I was going to get through tonight, so I really appreciate your doing it.
Oh, thanks for joining us, Ellen. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you with us.
JB Colson says, what's your hunch, Kozan?
Oh man, some of us have PTSD from 4 years ago, and I suffer from a little bit of that. People I really trust and respect seem to think that this election is likely going to go to Biden, and that gives me a kind of leaning in that direction, but I really don't know. And I think I've been a little bit before tonight pretending like I knew a bit. And now watching the numbers come in, I realize we really just watch what unfolds as it unfolds. Hoda, I see you've joined us. We rarely start this without you, Hoda. And I'm just wondering, what election night means to you?
For me, it is very important that the American nation recognizes its strengths and stop the stupidity of fighting and guns and all of that stuff, and celebrate your civilization. You have a strong basis. And the election for me is an opportunity for people to express themselves, and then we go from there to grow. We have to grow. The world is hoping for Biden, but the rest of you guys are the ones that vote. So God bless you. Go ahead and vote, and we'll make it through with you anyway. Love you all very, very much, and stay safe if the crazies go out on the road.
Oh, thank you, Hoda.
Thank you, Hoda. Appreciate it. Appreciate that wisdom too. We were looking at some things that Martin Luther King said about democracy, and you, Hoda, remind me of his one kind of most quoted phrase, which is, we can't slow up, we can't stop, because our love of democracy and our love of America. And so we see it on nights like tonight.
So I was thinking of a haiku, particularly since my good friend Natalie Goldberg, who lives just down the street from Upaya, she's on with us tonight. And I'm going to ask her to say something, but I just want to share the haiku first. It's from Mabutsu, wonderful haiku poet, written in 1874. And it goes, moon in a barrel, you never know just when the bottom will fall out. Moon in a barrel, you never just know when the bottom will fall out. So we don't know what that bottom means. It could be an incredible release and liberation for the water in the barrel. But what is so powerful is the image of this moon resting undisturbed on the surface of the water. So, Natalie, welcome to this community. I wonder if you could share a few words. You have to, yeah, but you have to take your mute off. Did you find? Okay, you got it.
Do it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. The thing that hits me so much is that whatever happens, and of course, Biden has to win. And I took a walk this morning and on Cerro Gordo, and the first person I very quickly ran into was Kozan. And we were both smiling. You could feel it through our masks. And I said, I feel so positive. I don't know why. I feel like it's a holiday. And he, who is very astute and would not get tossed away, said, I do too, but we better get ready for whatever. And I feel that no matter what happens, we've had a taste of just a little bit of how awful it could be and how awful it is for so many people in the world. And this was just a taste. My good friend Obiama Chigozie, who's a great writer from Nigeria, said, you know, Natalie, we can bitch up front about Trump and it could be in the newspaper. He said in Nigeria, no one dares says anything. And in my family, maybe in the middle of the night, one person will whisper one thing to another person. That's how frightened we are. So it gives me a perspective, and also how privileged and lucky we are, and how much we've been allowed to envision what a human being can be, to have such a large vision of it, where when you're really down and out, you don't have that. You can't even envision something like that. So hopefully it's going to Biden. It has to be. And I think Kozan will make it be that way, I think. But, and if not Kozan, then Joan or Kidaku. One of us is going to kick ass. It has to.
All 608 of us.
Yes. But no matter what, it's given us a closer taste of suffering and also woke us up to our brothers and sisters who are Native American and African American. You know, how deep the intolerance is.
Mhm. Thanks,
And
Nat.
okay, I could say one other thing.
Say.
Okay, you know, one of the things that I've certainly learned from, is it Thich Nhat Hanh, one of them said to look deeply. And if we look deeply at this country, we shouldn't be surprised what has happened in the last 4 years. But certainly I have been idealistic and a lot in La La Land. We have to keep looking deeply so we're not so surprised with what human beings are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Yeah.
So I want to read some words from Mary Jean Irion from her book, Yes, a World, a Mosaic of Meditation. She writes, and this is so, what you just said, Nat, really reminded me of her words. She says, faith is not being sure. It is not being sure, but betting with your last cent. Faith is not a series of guilt-edged propositions that you sit down to figure out. And if you follow all the logic and accept all the conclusions, then you have it. It is crumpling and throwing away everything, proposition by proposition, until nothing is left. And then writing a new proposition, your very own, to throw in the teeth of despair. Faith is not making religious sounding noises in the daytime. It is asking your inmost self questions at night, which probably a lot of us did last night, and then getting up and going to work. Faith is thinking thoughts and singing songs and making poems in the lap of death. Mary Jean Irion, thank you.
We'll be making all of these available on the resources page afterwards if you want to go back and find a quote or a poem you liked.
So just to let you know, after we have a good in and out breath, where we stand according to the New York Times in terms of electoral vote, so to speak. Biden has 131 and Donald Trump 98, and there are 309 in the balance. And some of these races, as Kozan indicated, are really close, like North Carolina is tending now toward Trump. Pennsylvania, tending toward Trump. Ohio, okay. Colorado looks hopeful in relation to Biden. North Carolina is really close, but it's very close toward Trump. Well, all I can say is thank Buddha for California.
And New Mexico.
And New Mexico. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we shall see. The itinerary is subject to reality.
Yeah. Pennsylvania is only 30% reporting, but is looking like it's going towards Trump. And at this point, it's really looking like those early states that might have called the election one way or another are going to go towards Trump. And Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that blue wall, as it used to be called before the 2016 election, will probably all have to go for Biden at this point. And so we'll be watching those, and Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all those states are going to report slowly. So that'll be a long process, and we'll kind of look at Pennsylvania through the night, see if we get any indications.
Speaking of California, Wendy Johnson. Hey, Wendy.
Good evening, everyone. What a treat to be with you. I want to just express gratitude, gratitude for the gift of being alive in difficult times, and gratitude for the capacity to see how brief this life is. I'm really feeling this tonight, and I'm feeling grief. I'm really feeling 535 children separated from their parents. I'm feeling the borders. I'm feeling the vastness, and also, I can muster courage, and I will tell you about an extraordinary walk this morning, a surprise walk, but I'm not going to turn away from the grief and the gravity with gravity in my heart. And also, please, the true gratitude to be alive in these times. So I want to say both. This morning, early in the morning, dreaming and hoping, I have to say, for a blue wave, I walked to the edge of the Pacific Ocean and down a kind of ragged cliff onto the beach. It was an empty beach, pretty much empty beach, and wrote a note to the water at the edge of the tide. And then looked up, and an elephant seal, a young elephant seal, was writhing and pumping and plumping out of the waves. This extraordinary being making everything possible. She was pushing out of the waves to be up on the beach. And she lay on the beach and writhed around, made a little nest for herself in the damp sand, and then turned to look squarely at me, and I at her, eye to eye. And it was profound, sweet. She was clearly healthy. I have a tendency to want to save all beings, human and more than human. Not a single whiff of that was present this morning, just the absolute miraculous connection of this extraordinary healthy being making her way out of the ocean to dry land. And then she writhed down into the sand, and with her young flippers completely covered herself with sand. And Kathy Fisher, our neighbor, had said, I just am so deeply alive and awake to what's happening and concerned. So I texted Kathy a picture of the elephant seal and said, the elephant seal says, don't worry, I have it covered. She completely covered herself with damp sand. And so I felt a little spaciousness, a little breath of life. And at the same time, the sound of sound of sorrow was there. And so I just wanted to share that this morning, news from the edge of the world. And I'm grateful to be alive in California, to have, with thousands and thousands of people, voted early, to have stood in the streets, to watch intimidation be deflected by courage and commitment, and just absolute pride and gratitude for the election sessions that have been happening here throughout California, and for the opportunity to have practiced with Upaya in your election session. It's been a real ballast and a real help, and it's beautiful to see you tonight. Much as I love once in a while seeing Rachel Maddow, I'm really happy to see the three fates, the three treasures sitting there with books at your back. So gratitude for life, for the gift of life, and for the ability to work together. Thank you.
Oh,
and for
Wendy,
help.
thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So I wanted to ask Noah, if he will, reflecting on Wendy's wonderful image of this elephant seal, this adolescent, Zoftic seal, pulling herself up onto dry land, covering herself in sand, but just enjoying it. The question I'd like us to ask and to respond in the chat stream is, how can we serve, no matter what the outcome is? How can we show up, no matter what the outcome is? Say the outcome is exactly aligned with what you really want, or the outcome is a catastrophe from your perspective. But how do we serve? It reminds me of the monk asking Basho, what's the nature of your practice? And Basho responded, whatever will serve. So how do we show up no matter what? And let's just see what we learn from you. Kozan, you want to share some get up, stand up? I love that. Listening to those who suffer, stay attuned, be kind to everyone.
Make healing music.
Make healing music.
We can show up ready to listen for the opportunity and the opening for building connection with each other.
Self-care and heart-to-heart connection.
Keep the communication open between those on both sides of the aisle.
I love this, with a flashlight and a hammer. I think of Jimmy Carter,
If I had a hammer. I vow not to close down my heart to anyone. That's beautiful. Listen to those who suffer. Stay attuned.
Listen to a tree. Today, I convened people to sing.
Like you've said, Roshi Joan, strong back, soft front.
Ah, yes.
That'll do it.
Ground and help others.
Continue to fight for environmental and social justice.
Yeah. Dance together.
Extend grace to all. Stay grounded in the love in my heart and offer it out every day.
Keep building community. I know Reggie really relates to that. Oh, I love this. Plant 2 trees.
Become the elephant seal.
Become the sand.
Space to grieve.
Speak with love. Tell the truth, says someone else. Sit well in my heart.
Keep my sense of humor.
Know that whatever arises, this is not the end.
Wage love. And here's an important one. Seek common ground. Our good friend John Paul Lederach, who's a peacemaker who's worked all over the world, has spoken about the experience of rehumanization, and which is to look deeply into the suffering of the person who's maybe not aligned with your values and has caused egregious harm, and to try to rehumanize that person. Wonderful. Okay, Kozan, I'd like to invite you to invite people to drop in meditation for a few moments. And then
So let's take a pause. And wherever you find yourself, maybe just notice your body and sit upright or stand upright. Find the kind of stretch of your bones and your muscles, your skin. Expand into your body and then relax. And notice the breath filling your body as you inhale and emptying out as you exhale. Notice with this that this breath that gives you life is shared with all beings. Across this country tonight, to the depths of the ocean, around this whole world, this basic, simple breath of life connects us. And in dwelling in the breath, noticing the breath fill your belly, your cells, you are with all beings. So let's just rest in the breath. And if you have a shortness of breath or tightness in the body, if there's anywhere you're holding on, just bring your awareness there too and breathe with it. And in our final couple breaths, bringing to mind the gratitude for our ability to come together in this way and to be present and practice in this way. And as we do, dedicating that gratitude, that merit, that awareness to the benefit of all the beings we're connected to through this breath.
Thank you, Kozan. So I wanted to read something from Uchiyama Roshi, the late Uchiyama Roshi. He's written a beautiful book called Opening the Hand of Thought and many other pieces. So here's a reflection from him. However, since everything, and in this case, even misfortune, is our life, what is essential, especially in these circumstances, is to meet adversity with an attitude of equanimity. If we fall into hell, then we need the resolve to see that hell is our home. When we are being boiled in the demon's cauldron, that is where we have to do zazen. When we are pursued up a mountain of needles. We should be willing to climb that mountain, hand over hand, even at the risk of our life. When we throw all our life energy into whatever we might encounter, no demon can help but retreat. And then Uchiyama says, what a way to live. What a way to live. So I'm going to suggest to Noah Kikaku that we open the chat stream, but also raised hands, reflecting on these words of Uchiyama Roshi, and then we'll return to the election map. But let's just take a few moments. What's your take on this? What a way to live.
Can you copy the quote into the chat?
Maybe, I'll try.
And really, if anyone wants to step in and share,
just raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button in the participants window.
There we go. Debbie writes, I'm feeling a wave of sadness.
Today is a great day to die. And they said, remember Johnny Kabat-Zinn's book, wherever we go, there we are.
We have a couple hands raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tracy Nall.
Good evening. Thank you so much gratitude for this right now. You have answered my question a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit deeper if we could. One of my favorite quotes, and I've heard it misquoted and I'll misquote it again, is every time you think you found enlightenment, spend the afternoon or the week with your family. And that's been sitting heavy in my heart a lot. I mean, throughout this whole, well, just forever. I grew up born and raised in South Dakota, and I've lived in a lot more progressive places since then. But there's this whole anxiety and neuroses I have every time I go home. And I grew up in one of the most beautiful parts in the world. And the anxiety I get to know that I'm going home is, so my question for you is, you know, and we have touched on it, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper because I think this is a reality for everybody in this room. I try to walk the walk as much as I talk the talk in so many ways. And there is still this part of me that feels like I know, and I've said this to my family before, why would your values and my values align in 100% of the ways? We're in different socioeconomic groups, we're in different cultures, we're in different age brackets, we're in different, all of these things. And yet I'm at this place a little bit where I find out, when I find out somebody's a Trump supporter, it's almost as if I've seen their shadow in a way that I can't take back. And I'm just trying to give love and give love and give love. And you know, I dropped my empathic shield and just try to be with it. And anyway, all of that being said, what advice do you have, again, and seek common ground is a big takeaway, Roshi, that you said, but can we dive deeper into that? Because regardless of what the results of this is going to be, this is, again, another conversation we're all going to be having. And I'd love to find some graceful articulations moving forward. So, thank you.
Tracy, thank you so much. So I wonder if we can invite Zenshin Kaplo, Sensei Zenshin Kaplo, who is in our midst to reflect on your question.
Oh my.
Hi.
Oh my.
I warned you.
It's true. It's true. I think that when it's about family and friends, all we can do is keep turning towards. I just had a conversation tonight with a African-American man who works for the congregation that I serve. And he told me that he didn't vote, that he didn't believe in either of the parties anymore. And, you know, to stay open and present in that conversation to his truth is it's like being, you know, kind of penetrated and turned inside out. And yet it makes everything more real. I don't know. That's what comes to me. I actually had a poem I wanted to read. May I read it?
Yes.
So I just spent 12 hours doing a online offering spiritual grounding to 48 Unitarian Universalist ministers from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. And this was the poem I read, which I just think is extraordinary, by Unitarian minister. His name is Mark Bellatini, called Election Promises. I hear the polls are going to be open on Tuesday all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them and vote too. But today I say the polls are not just open on Tuesday. I say they are open every day, every hour, even here, even now. Right now, I am going to vote for the robin's egg sky, the vanilla clouds, the purple shadow spreading under the ginkgo tree. I am going to vote for tulips and redbuds. I am going to vote for love that doesn't have to run in someone else's circle in order to be love. I'm going to vote the homeless into homes. I'm going to vote the uneducated into classrooms that teach them in the way they learn best, not the way that would be the most convenient. I'm going to vote the sick into healing. I'm going to vote the lost into belonging. I'm going to vote right now for the right to dream of a world where the word politics doesn't stop me in my tracks and where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I'm going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free, no matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them. I actually am going to vote for love. I'm going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for me right now, right here, silently, but for real.
Oh, thank you, Zenshin, so much, truly. And, you know, going from that poem to Tracy's question of, and what I said before about rehumanization, John Paul Lederach's, this process, this practice of rehumanization. I'm curious, Zenshin, you know, when you see someone causing great harm to others, what is the response? What is the appropriate response?
You know, what comes to mind at the moment, as soon as you said that, was when I ordained as a priest with Soketsu Norman Fisher, a 7-year-old girl who was at the ceremony, a daughter of a friend of mine, wrote a poem about the oak tree and the willow tree standing next to one another, the weeping willow. And I read the poem to Norman during the public question and answer showsan afterwards. And I said, you know, what does this have to do with ordination and the Buddha way? And he said, our practice is to weep.
Hmm.
Our practice is to weep.
Wow. I'm reminded of the Zen phrase mono non aware in Japanese, translated by Robert Bly as the slender sadness.
Mm.
And yes, that. I remember I often talk about this when I was a volunteer in the penitentiary of New Mexico, sitting with men on death row and in maximum security, and just not turning away from the truth of the harm and the sorrow that they had created through their actions, but also of this kind of flash that I would have of underneath all that, a human. Underneath all that, a human. Can I see, both that person's humanness and also the suffering that led to this person creating so much suffering for others? I also, we heard from Batita. She said, I'm a lone progressive liberal in my conservative family. They challenge me to acknowledge their loving goodness, despite their voting for Mr. Trump. My conservative and loving family prompts me to question my perceptions and assumptions. I'm also inspired to learn to communicate in mindful, loving, nonviolent ways. So I think it's fine to question one's assumptions. Roshi Bernie would always say when we would stand in opinions, and I certainly have a long list of them, he'd kind of come out of the great Lebowski and he'd say, it's just your opinion, man. And I'd like go, oh. But it is coming to terms with these biases that might be deeply grounded in truth. I mean, the truth, the science on climate change is unquestionable, except by some. 540 some children lost from their parents. We can't question that, the veracity of that. We can't question the number of Black people who are killed by police. We can't question that. That's the way it is. But I think that what leads to that kind of suffering, in fact, are opinions and assumptions. And how do we look more deeply, as Kozan or Natalie spoke to when she was reflecting with us, how do we look deeply into the roots of suffering in our culture? And also, how do we stand up or continue to practice or go deep into the truth of suffering of the charnel grounds that various of us serve in? So I'm going to ask us to return to the charnel ground of the electorate for a moment. Would you like to reflect, Kozan? I know he doesn't want to, but I'm putting him on the spot.
Thanks, Zenshin.
Thank you so much, Zenshin. Well, I'm getting text updates from some people who are paying closer attention than I. One is someone quoting Jimmy Kimmel, who tweeted, "This is like being awake during your own surgery." And it's beginning to feel a little bit like that. So what can we say? What do we know? We know Arizona is looking like it's turning toward Biden. It's about 75% reported. And again, that was one of those states that has counted its early votes. So this is a place where the numbers are going to be pretty complete. And it's currently 53.7% for Biden, 45% for Trump. And that's a a turn. You know, that's a state that Trump carried last election. What we're still looking at is Pennsylvania's only reported 40%. It's an important state. It's looking very good for Trump right now, almost a 10-point, more than a 10-point lead. But that's to be expected in Pennsylvania. The mail-in votes, which are heavily Democrat, likely aren't part of that count yet. And then Ohio is looking like it's going to be going for Trump. And again, we have these 3 states. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan that are not going to be clear tonight. That's going to be something that will be ongoing. What else am I hearing from people? You know, there are a number of pundits talking about how this was expected, that there are kind of expectations, as we started with tonight, that are set by the media, set by our polls, set by whatever filter bubble we find ourselves in if we're online citizens, and that those are always a bit of a story, but that the actual election was to be won by certain states, particularly these states in the Midwest, and that those are still looking pretty much like they're going as expected, but also are going to be too close to call. And in looking at these numbers or delving into the kind of charnel ground of, okay, what's going on now and how ugly is it? There's also just the delving back into the media aspect of this, that this is part of our kind of media landscape. It's mediated by the various ways in which we share information these days. And I think that's another thing, just going back to Tracy's question, that is so important to look at, that part of our practice is noticing the water that we swim in, the air that we breathe, that we literally stop and notice the air we breathe when we sit zazen. And these days, that is a digital universe that plays a kind of symphony of opinions back to us that are usually the opinions that agree with us. And so when we meet someone face to face that has a different set of opinions or is in a different digital landscape, it can be harder than ever to find common ground because there's so much we have to weed out of the way. And I think if there's a practice we have in front of us and that we're all learning to do better and better, it's the practice of undoing so much of that bias that the water we swim in has done for us. Yeah.
Thank you, Kozan. So I'd like to invite us once again to take a deep in breath. And on the exhale, relax if you can. And for a few moments, remember really why you're here. I feel like every person who is with us this evening, every single one, has this deep aspiration to see suffering diminish in our world for all species, for the young, for those living in sacrifice zones, in our cities and next to our factories. For those who are guests in the corrections system. For those who are facing eviction from their home. for caregivers taking care of those who are suffering from this virus. For those who have experienced loss. For those who have been in isolation and feel the effects of a solitude which is unhealthy for them, of loneliness. Of no one caring. For the elderly who are in institutions where their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren cannot visit. For Black and brown people who fear to walk down the street. For the Navajo, the Diné, in the reservations just west of us, who have no access to water. And letting this population of vulnerable beings, men and women and children, letting them move into the background of our awareness, not turning away from the truth of suffering. Allowing a kind of resolve to arise in this moment. Yes, I will meet this world. I will not abandon you. I will come alongside. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Noah to, we're going to actually take a moment. I just want to.
A couple people with their hands raised.
Oh yeah, let's take some questions. Go back to the map and then Tracy Chapman.
Mark Foreman.
Good evening. I raised my hand quite a while ago, or following that one poem, and so much has transpired since then. I may have forgotten why I raised it, but it was around the idea of equanimity. As I recall, equanimity was mentioned in the poem, and what has brought me here is equanimity of being present here while all this is going on around me, sensing, settling into my own sense of balance now in this moment. But I'm holding it, the equanimity as I sense into it deepens my compassion practice. And I'm sensing tension around the neighborhood, around the community here, that there's a lot of uncertainty for sure. And I think a question that's bubbling up for me is the role that each of our compassion practices can play in holding space for Donald Trump, holding space for maybe the rest of the nation, for the world, for all suffering, and how we find our space, our ability to come back to that, regardless of what the election results will be, of finding that balance. And I'm reminded of a Rumi poem. I'm not going to say it, but it's about, there's a field and I'll meet you there, where right and wrong have no meaning. And it's like, for 30 years of my life, I was a police officer, and I feel highly hurtful sometimes when I hear the rhetoric directed at the police, because I was one. And it's like, well, no, now I'm working with police officers to open them to their compassion. And it's the one thing that scares the bejeebers out of them. They'll go into harm's way. We as a society need them to come to our rescue. And sometimes they have to do harsh things, and to open that space for them in a compassionate way, to be able to, what you did is not okay, but you as a person, I can still accept you and love you. And, you know, the concept of fierce compassion, of however that plays out, is, anyway, that's really what's going on with me right now is there's a lot. And if the wheels come off the wagon tonight or this week, as we're waiting for results out of this, I'm sitting here hanging on, knowing that the officers that I work with, that I've cared for, also are over here voting on Trump on the other side. And to find that balance is maybe a place, if we can all find our own equanimous space and continue to do what it is that we do here on our own practices and deepening them, it may allow us then to, okay, what's coming next? What's the next thing that's coming? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark, I wondered if I could just read the poem you're referring to, which is one of Rumi's famous ones. Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about.
Thank you, Kozan. Thank you, Mark.
Should we take one more?
Yeah.
Noah?
One more.
Marguerite.
Hi. Thank you for this evening. When I started out, without realizing it, of course, I was numb. And then when Roshi Joan talked about sharing that we have to make hell our home, and Natalie was talking about Thich Nhat Hanh's mention of looking deeply, and then Kozan, we have to know the waters we swim in. My fear just started to kick in. I started to have this discomfort, and I realized I was becoming alive, you know, that I started to really face into it and lean into it, what's going on here. And I'm really grateful for that. But to be with this discomfort and not get overwhelmed and yet stay in touch, I found that to be the practice in some ways right now. And so that's kind of where I am. And I just wanted to thank you for waking me up a little bit to this deeper truth, of we gotta be in touch with what is, not we would like to be, and the media and the bubble, and that I always experience when I meet a Trump supporter as a therapist. A lot of my clients are liberals, but then when I meet a Trump supporter, it always feels like a minority, but it's not true. It's like I'm in my bubble, and so to really want to understand more deeply what the suffering is on that other side. Does that make any sense?
It really does.
Thank you so much for.
Thank you so much, you. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Kozan.
Yeah. You want me to talk about the election, huh?
I know.
Well, what did I just hear from a dear friend who's in the thick of it? I guess MSNBC is reporting that the Michigan Secretary of State said final votes won't be counted for another 24 hours. So tomorrow evening. So that gives a kind of sense of when we'll have some certainty around things. It's going to be election week, not an election night, which makes me really happy to be here with all of you. As Reggie said, starting us off, resourcing ourselves in each other, sitting in kind of openness, not getting too borne down into the details and worn down by the details of all this. I will say one interesting thing I see looking at the map is we're going to have a number of stories coming out of tonight, tomorrow, about what's unfolding, what different parts of the country are feeling politically. Florida looks like there was a Latinx vote, probably in large part part of the Cuban population in Florida that is supporting Trump, that feels that they've turned late to the Trump campaign. And then we have this other story in Arizona, a state that's flipped for Biden, with a very deep grassroots organizing community in the Latinx community there around border politics, around, Sheriff Arpaio, who was a pretty horrific sheriff in Maricopa County. And out of that has come this really rich and it looks like quite successful grassroots organizing effort. So there's not going to be, I think, a clear or easy story. I think we're invited to really look at the details. And again, it's looking more and more like we just won't know tonight. As much as I had hoped that would not be the case, it's looking like it's the case.
But the numbers look really good.
They look great. I mean, 75, 46, those are beautiful numbers. Who doesn't like nice round numbers like that? No, what are you talking about the who has electoral votes?
Yeah.
So Kigaku's looking at just what the electoral votes have been called. So it looks like 209 votes for Biden, 118 electoral votes for Donald Trump. One big reason for this is that Texas hasn't been called yet, which is the largest number of electoral votes for Trump tonight. And it's looking very likely that that'll go towards Trump, although it may be too close to call tonight. It's leaning that way. It would be an incredible flip if it did flip. And the first time that's happened in ages. Other states aren't being called that are clearly red states, like Montana, likely Iowa and Georgia. So this is just about what's being called and what's not. Nevada will likely go red. So really, we're just looking at swing states that are going to matter. What do you think?
Part of reaching across the aisle is to also look at the Fox map, which is a little different. Their numbers, they still have Biden winning, but Trump has a lot more votes here.
they've called a few states for him. Yeah, I mean, they still have Trump ahead in the Electoral College. But should we look at what Breitbart is saying about it too?
Do they have a map? I'll look.
No, I mean, I think that's enough.
Fox.
No, just detail on the electoral map. You know, the notion that we'll know by the end of the night, as we have so many nights before, is just not going to be the case. And I wonder, you know, others have been looking at this closely too. And if anyone wants to put any of their observations or insights in the chat, maybe we can open it up for that.
Yeah, it's actually been open.
Oh, great.
Sharing things.
Why don't you share a little bit of what's coming up on the chat, Noah?
Well, nothing is yet.
What do you folks think about the count, the vote demonstrations these next Wednesdays?
Marcelo says, thank you for this opportunity to experience the election night in sanity, acceptance, and love. Yeah, it's really nice to be together tonight, you know, to have so many of us receiving this news as a community. I feel resourced by it. Hoda says the election map in Canada says 192 Biden and 111 Trump. Yep. Washington Post. See, every news outlet chooses to call states in a different way, which we get a sense of that by when they called the electoral map.
Which has the most truthiness?
Yeah, I would say Breitbart probably. The Daily Show.
So Yvette wants to know, when the news organizations call the winner of states, are these projections based on clerk's office data partially, or how do they determine to call the winner?
Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning. Yeah, it's different per state and per news organization.
You know, one of the things that I'm really curious about, just in terms of my own experience, is, you know, we're watching this like we're watching a game show.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's kind of reality TV. It's also based on some kind of quantification process. You know, we sort of believe how many beans are in the jar, and that's what we base our life on. And also, there's a kind of winner-loser paradigm that is operational in our political process that we call democracy. But I wonder if we are, in a certain way, it's like a sort of in a dopamine cycle. You know, we're sort of seeking an answer. It's a game show. You know, it's an accumulation of now electoral votes, tracking it. And it's kind of interesting to observe how the body feels, how we polarize, how we also make a kind of clan, that's our clan, and the effects of that. And, you know, what if we were all on the same team? Wow. Now that might be also a fascist paradigm, if we're all on the same team.
Say more.
In other words, you know, we're all in the same think space. And I think what's interesting about our country is that somehow it's set up to tolerate or to celebrate inclusivity or diversity, even though, you know, when we don't, then there's egregious suffering.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I just want to ask all of us, if we were to redo democracy, what would it look like? You know, if it weren't this competition, if it weren't this kind of game show, dopamine, trance, chasing after, you know, the result.
Yeah. You know, Ezra Klein's a political journalist and commentator I really like, and he wrote a book called Why We're Polarized, and he's pointing to just this, which is that our entire political structure is played like a sports game. And before the last 30 years, there was less of a sense that you had to choose a team, that, you know, I was the Raiders and you were the Broncos, and no matter what happened on that team, that was our team, and we rooted for our team no matter what. And he runs through in his book why the kind of macro identification of being a Republican or a Democrat, of siding with wearing masks or not wearing masks, whatever the kind of indicator is, becomes a super identity for us. And this whole process, I think, as you're pointing to, like a game show, like a sports game, reinstantiated day after day, the way we talk about the news, the way we talk about our politics, reinstantiating this narrative that we need to choose one or the other, that we're on one or the other. And the way we look at even the electoral map tonight has that red versus blue, you know, kind of going at each other, this line of red fighting blue all night long. And that's not the reality of it. The reality of it is, on one level, we are all on the same team, you know, very much so, necessarily so, even if we would like it to be otherwise. And that's not just the national team, that's the team of humanity, that's this global team. So I think that's at stake tonight in a really real way. And I wonder how people are feeling about that. You know, I also think it's important to say, we're talking about who wins the Electoral College. We're not talking about who wins the popular vote.
Right.
We already kind of know who's going to win the popular vote. And that is always important to remember, that we're talking about a game within a game, a structure that people came up with that is deeply imperfect.
It's interesting to look at the popular vote thus far. It's, you know, the margin is very, very thin. But let's get off the game show for a minute. Go, I went right there.
I see a good one to answer your question.
Yeah.
Because this speaks to Kozan's work before. The best democracy would look like this, but without unlimited corporate money in politics. Would you agree?
And a few other things. Oh, I worked with Professor Lawrence Lessig on getting money out of politics for a couple of years, and it seems like the central issue of corruption, he calls it the root of the issue, hacking. By getting rid of that, we're hacking at the root of corruption. And by putting corporate money into our politics, people are corrupting kind of the root of our democracy. But, you know, systemic violence, whether it's racism or sexism, or, you know, the structures that have ensured the minimum wage or the average income have stayed the same for the last 40 years, those have to change too. And they're not separate. You don't just change one to change the other. So yeah, I think that's part of it. I'm gonna put, I think it's we're getting a little bit into the game and into the weeds now, but I'm gonna put Ezra Klein's book in the chat too, in case people are interested in that part of it. I'm really curious what people think though. What would be, you know, this is a night between two administrations, between kind of two imaginary worlds, where we can bear witness and we can also imagine what might come. And I'm really curious what people imagine as the world they want to step into, that we want to step into after today.
I'll draw.
Is someone off mute? So you can raise your hand if you want to chime in. You can put your thoughts in the chat. And to raise your hand, how do you do that, Noah?
You click on the participants button, and then under the list of participants, there should be a button that says raise hand. Do you see that? No, because you're co-hosts, you don't have it. And if you're on a mobile device, you press the more button, and then it should say raise hand there.
Great.
But there's a lot more messages here too.
Maybe the Green Party will gain one day. The US needs something thing other than red versus blue. I love what was shared in meditation and the air we all breathe. Thank you, Ruth. Doesn't that get to the problem with our system that is beyond just money and politics, but also in our daily lives, as being focused on everything we do? When monetary wealth is what we measure our human value by, we can never have equitable systems. Thank you, Megan. Hodo writes, a world that is not defined by the colonial history. Acknowledge the injustice and re-educate ourselves. Same for Canada. Thank you, Hoda.
A couple hands.
Yeah, go for it.
Someone named CE. Do you want to unmute yourself?
I want to know how to be with the fact that I'm seeing so many people who are so hateful and crude and violent coming forth in this election. As I watch the results, it is breaking my heart that these are my fellow citizens. I don't think I ever realized that they were there, so separatist and so distant from any kind of loving humanity. So I would love to hear from you, Roshi, about that.
So I want to just say I share your brokenheartedness. I share your dismay. And I also, again, from having worked in the penitentiary as a volunteer, the penitentiary is a kind of rage machine. And so I had a chance for 6 years to study rage, including not the least of which was my own, just at the sense of what a toxic environment. You're putting people into an environment which has nothing to do with corrections. And when I was sitting one day with one of the men who wouldn't come out of his cell, but I was talking to him and he was talking to me through the food port, I suddenly realized in his case, in his situation, that his rage and hatefulness was coming out of a complete sense of powerlessness, a lack of agency, and that he felt underneath it just this incredible sense of helplessness. And it was a wake-up call for me. It was not to excuse that kind of vicious anger, but it was more that trying to understand and sensing into where that anger comes from. And as a result of that, it really changed my relationship with the people that I was working with inside that system. And it also, when I see things in our political landscape that I feel are egregious violations or trespass against basic humanity, and I feel my own helplessness and anger arise in relation to what my perceptions are. It's a very interesting process because I try to enter into, what would it be like to be in the state of mind and heart where there's such an absence of care and love, where there's this kind of cruelty, and then to understand that too is suffering. And it was exactly, in those moments of strange empathy where I really learned a lot. Which was, again, going back to the work of John Paul Lederach. It helped me to rehumanize the men that I worked with inside the penitentiary, but it's also helped me to be in resonance with, connected to, not turn away from the people in our political system that I think have fomented so much suffering and harm. On the other hand, I want to say this. For me, I was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's for years, and Thai was very clear, and we articulated this in the 9th precept of the order of interbeing, the 9th mindfulness training, which is, he says, you must stand up for justice even at the risk of your own life. And I think it's very important at this time for us to speak truth to power. And whether Biden wins or loses, say Biden wins and Harris win, then we have, I feel, a moral obligation out of love for this earth and humanity to work to bring about the world that we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren. So it brings me back to, for me, all of this is about love. That's what it boils down to. And having the courage not to turn away from every form of suffering, not just the forms of suffering that produce pity within us, but every form of suffering.
Zenshin also said she could comment.
Yeah, Zenshin, I would love to hear your reflection.
What I have really been sitting with over the last months and years of study is that I keep thinking of Vimalakirti in the Vimalakirti Sutra, where he says, I'm sick because the world's sick. And we're sick. We're very sick in this country. We have a deep and toxic wound of the genocide of indigenous people and of slavery and of the continued toxic racism. And I really believe this election, the last election, it's all about this. Mm-hmm. And until we, as a country and in our own hearts, begin to turn towards and heal that wound, it will just continue to produce gangrenous developments. And I just think it just seems so clear to me at this point. And that's our work, I think.
Yeah. Zenshin, when you speak about healing that wound, what pathways do you feel are present where we can begin that work or continue that work?
Well, I think some of it is individual and internal, that being courageous enough to actually, read the literature, read how to be an anti-racist, read the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, which is, these are they're traumatic reads. Visit the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, all that work that changes the heart. And then communally, this is what I've heard over and over, we have to develop relationships we live in just such an extraordinarily segregated country. I can't remember what the numbers are, but like how few people who are white even have one close person in their life who is of another race. So that work. And then, one of the things that Ibrahim Kendi says in How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I just keep sitting with this, is that there is no such thing as a neutral policy. Yeah. There are only racist policies and anti-racist policies. Oh. And if we think about that in terms of our country, right, it's just, it is huge. But then again, the history is huge. So we have a lot of work to do. but I do feel like we have to face that this election is an expression of that wound.
Thank you. I would really appreciate you speaking, Zenshin, to how contemplative practice plays a part or not in healing these wounds that are both individual and as well social.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it feels like what practice gives me is the courage and ground to be able to turn towards those things. I remember being a young teenager when I first began to read some of the books about what had happened for Indigenous people in this country, and I couldn't bear it. Yeah. It broke me. Mm-hmm. Now there's something in me that says, I see all your work, right, to the bearing witness, but that the practice is what gives the heart and mind and body the capacity to bear witness.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Kozan, where are we?
Not much has changed, alas. We do have one other person who has their hand raised, though. Do we want to go? It's Inga's iPad.
Inga's iPad.
Yep, it's me. Am I still muted? Or
No,
am I,
we
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Very briefly, I'm 90. I knew Roshi Joan when she was very young with long hair. I have your picture in the back of my closet. You took me on a retreat where we walked the grass in our bare feet. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a long, long time ago. It's beginning to send you that picture. But I've come a ways since then. I grew up in Nazi Germany, so this, of course, for me is terrifying. But what I want to say is I've also been a therapist and trained, etc., stuff like that. What I want to say, what has occurred to me now, because I'm so old and have seen so much, you know, and my practice, of course, has helped me go in that direction. There's we have a youth culture certainly in America and Canada. You know, you have to, you never grow old. You're not allowed to grow old, and you have to get a trophy wife and use Viagra and all that stuff. So there's a terrible, terrible fear of death. It's, you know, why I keep asking myself, why don't they realize this pandemic, you can get killed? What do you want to die for? You know, they don't, I don't think anybody's aware that death is in the picture, because a lot of the people I listen to, with compassion, I might add, death is not being entertained at all. It's just subconscious, really way down. The only other thing I want to say, and I've been inspired by everything people have said tonight, is we don't allow our children to bond. Trump is a beautiful example of that. I didn't have to read his niece's book to realize how damaged he is and how damaged so many of the people who are running this country are. And because of the damage, because you don't even get a leaf when you have a baby. If you're not working for a company or something like that, you're on your own. And even if you are working for a company, what do you get? 6 weeks, 3 months at the most. No baby bonds in 3 weeks. That's just so these are people who have never had a chance to taste love and to bond. And that's why it's very, very hard for them to grow up into loving human beings who are bonded, if you will, to their own people and to the larger community. I also want to thank Sentient for what she said about how broken she felt when she read the suffering. It doesn't go away, but yes, it's true. My being with you tonight is a gift, and I thank you for it. I dread it tonight, and but it, in a wonderful way, it's been a gift. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inga.
Thank you, Inga.
So I was just reading a comment from Christine Rogers. I was at a faculty meeting in a Lakota school where they talked about intergenerational trauma and how the history not only keeps on repeating itself, but also is staying within the families and affecting generation after generation. Yeah, thank you, Christine. So my friends, I'm going to ask Kozan to give a summary of where we are and might be in the perhaps the next 24 hours, because if I understand it, we probably are not going to learn much more in terms of the actual outcome of this election. But what we can learn from is our attachment to quick outcomes. and you know, how we work this edge of uncertainty. And, you know, for many of us, it could be uncertainty that is also colored deeply by fear or dismay. Kozan.
Yeah, well, I'm really moved by Zenshin sharing with us just this invitation to bear witness to the sickness, the rot, the disconnection and dislocation in our society, in our history that we inherit, that we play out continuously to this day. And, you know, I'm noticing my own expectations as I look at this result coming in, trickling in as the hours get later and later. The expectation that in the middle of a pandemic, so many are literally, that in the middle, it seems like disarray, there is, it looks like no great resolve against the current administration close right now. Arizona's not yet called, though it is looking like it's going to lean towards Biden as the night comes to a close. Texas is not yet called. I actually don't know the details for Texas's early voting, but I imagine they're waiting for some of that. And we have the whole Midwest that's still up for grabs. You know, there's some very, you know, Donald Trump seems to be doing very well in Ohio, and with 50% of the state reporting. In Pennsylvania, he's up by almost 14%, more than 14%, which was a state that the polls predicted would go for Biden. Still too early, but clear that this is going to be a close election. And, you know, spending this evening with all of you really reminds me that we get to wake up tomorrow and be citizens and be neighbors and show up to whatever the right compassionate action will be tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And I'm not sure I would have such a buoyant or spacious view if it weren't for sharing the evening together. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Kozan.
Yeah.
Kigaku, thank you. And I am like Kozan and Kigaku. I would not have wanted to do this evening without you. and without good friends. I think one of the most powerful things that we come to realize, particularly as we get older, is the profound value of relationship and of community. And being able to take this journey with you into further uncertainty is a very powerful thing. Because one of the things I learn as a pilgrim is that you don't know what the next step will in fact bring. And I'm reminded of some words, and Inge, talking about growing up in Nazi Germany, of a very powerful revolutionary in Germany, a man called Rudolf Barrow. And he says, when an old culture is dying, the new culture is born by a few people who are not afraid to be insecure. When an old culture is dying, the new culture is born by a few people who are not afraid to be insecure. So as we conclude this evening, 2.5 hours in this journey into uncertainty, I would like to dedicate the merit to all of those who are suffering in the field of this pandemic, to all of those who are suffering the depredations of racism, to vulnerable elders, to Indigenous peoples, and to children. May the merit of this time together benefit and protect all those who do not have the resources that would support them. And concluding, reciting with my two wonderful friends here, the vows of the Bodhisattva. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken, awaken. Do not squander your life. Thank you, everybody. So we will put our time together, the Zoom video on our resource page, along with some of what we shared. And I hope that we can engage this practice of strong back, equanimity, what Mark was speaking about, an open front, soft front, uphold ourselves in the midst of whatever conditions arise, and to be really open to whatever reality is unfolding in front of us. And on
is it the 8th?
Yeah, well, actually, you're leading us as Zenkai, aren't you?
I am.
So perfect timing. A day of practice online with Kozan on Saturday. And I think it will be just the vitamin that will be good for all of us. And then on Sunday, I will be meeting with those of you who wish from 11 to 12:30 Mountain Time. I've forgotten the name of what I'm doing. What is it called, Noah?
Let's find out.
It's our final segment of the election series.
And I hope you'll join us for that. Kozan and I will Noah will be, the magician making it all happen, and Kozan will be hosting, and I'll be jumping into the inquiry process and teachings with all of you for that hour and a half. And I just thank you so much.
It's a really good title.
What is it?
Practicing with radical uncertainty in a world in turmoil.
Okay, that was prophetic. I just hope the turmoil dials down a little bit before Sunday. But, as I said at the beginning, the itinerary is subject to reality. Only love. Thank you.
Can I
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Okay.
Say goodbye.
All right.
Is there?
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you.
Recognize and maybe
Thank you.
Thank you.
terrible.
Thank
I don't think we should.
Big love.
I think the
Big
Senate
lots of
race is
love.
the worst thing. That's the bad news.
Love. Love.
Yeah, they're just.
Thank you so much.
I think I'm gonna go to bed. Don't you think we should go to bed?
Bring your goodness.
Right now,
So,
Biden has more electoral votes, but I don't know.
I'm gonna have any more information.